Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality podcast, is brought to you by eMenu Choice Point of Sale and Clark Pro. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Today on Tips from Trestle, I'm excited to be talking with Brian Bosche. Brian is the CEO and co-founder of The Purpose Company, where he helps leaders and organizations discover and leverage their purpose for tangible results. As a sought-after consultant and speaker, Brian has worked with major companies like Walmart, Expedia, and the U.S. Air Force to increase productivity and performance through purpose-driven strategies. He is also the co-author of the USA Today top book, The Purpose Factor: Extreme Clarity for Why You're Here and What to Do About It, which provides a practical process for discovering one's purpose. Brian's expertise in purpose-driven leadership has been featured in media outlets like Success Magazine, Yahoo Finance, and Fox News Channel. Brian, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Good to be with you, Aaron. This is going to be fun. Let's do this.
Yeah, I'm excited. Purpose is something that I have, as an entrepreneur now for almost 3 years, have been really trying to better understand, kind of selfishly, right? Because am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? It feels like it, but I want to dig deeper and really truly get that. And I know in the senior living industry, we work with, seniors that need us to support them. And I think a lot of times knowing that purpose, understanding like the why behind it can really be beneficial. And so let's talk first a little bit about some of the principles in your book, The Purpose Factor, and maybe how they can apply to our industry. My guess is that they apply fairly similarly to other industries.
Mm-hmm. It's actually even more important in your industry. Purpose is one of the greatest indicators of longevity, among many other indicators too, like health choices, nutrition, exercise, all of that. But when you look at all the studies, I think there's one study that I just recently came across, that if you have a daily sense of purpose in life in your later years, it's actually cognitively challenging in a good way, making your brain work, which doesn't allow the brain to get kind of sedentary, if you will. And I think it reduces the likelihood of memory issues by as much as 37%. So daily purpose in life in the senior living industry, not only from a leadership perspective, but also from a wellness perspective on the customer end, is huge. And that's also true in a lot of organizations. I think there's this myth, if you will, that purpose is fluffy and intangible and subjective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there is study after study after study that actually shows that purpose equals performance and that purpose actually has an ROI in retention, ROI in recruiting, ROI in customer experience. And I really think, if I could say this and kind of put a point on it, I really think that we're moving from a transactional economy to a purpose economy.
Yeah, I think what you just said there at the end makes so much sense, right? Because when I'm talking to leaders in senior living, especially because I work primarily with, food service directors and chefs, and a lot of them will come from restaurant industry or the hotel industry. And that's a very transactional business, right? It's like, give you your service, give you your food, move on to the next table. And when they come into senior living, it becomes very relational, very like, what's the purpose behind it? And so I think there's a lot of value and truth in what you just said about all of that. And so I want to kind of start at the top of the pyramid when I think about leadership in senior living. And so how does understanding purpose, how would that help executives and the kind of the regional leadership in senior living be more impactful about the decision-making they can do for our communities?
I love that you're using the phrase decision-making, because that is the most underappreciated thing about purpose. Purpose is your number one decision-making tool. But what that's predicated on is we have to know our precise purpose. And for definition purposes, I think it's really good if we get a good tight definition of what we're talking about. Purpose is the best of what we have to help others. Now, most people aren't seeking purpose. They're actually seeking the result of knowing their purpose. And the result of knowing your purpose is actually fulfillment. So fulfillment is really the feedback loop on living a life in leadership according to your purpose. Fulfillment is the result of helping others with the best of what you have. And we can kind of get all wonky with it and break purpose down into the four elements and all of that. But really, when you know your purpose, you're able to ask in every opportunity, every relationship, will this relationship or opportunity allow me to give the best of what I have? Because if it does, we can perform well as an organization. We can perform well in terms of how we serve our customers. We can perform well in terms of how I serve my team that serves my customers. And also, too, I think we kind of get this backwards sometimes. I think some organizations, because organizations have to make money, they have to make revenue, they have to make profit. So we have to make a performance case. That's definitely got to be a thing. But
Yeah.
what's really cool is scalable exponential performance is downstream from purpose. Funny enough, purpose is not downstream for performance. You can't use performance to put purpose in an organization. Purpose actually has to come first. And for us as an organization, I look at it this way. I have to make a purpose case before I make a performance case, because if I do the due diligence on the purpose part of the decision, the
Mhm.
performance gets way easier. Of course, paired up with good strategy.
Yeah. No, just pulling it all together, it makes so much sense, right? It's almost like without purpose being that foundation, you can't build the rest of the organization on top of that. And you can't
Right.
even give good direction to the leaders in the communities because there's no, I know it's to come back to, there's no why behind it. And I think that's the
Yeah.
beauty of the little that I know about purpose as I'm going through my learning curve on it. And so, one of the issues that I think we struggle with in our industry is, and I think a lot of industries deal with this probably, employee
Sure.
retention and satisfaction. You know, there's definitely when you find those caregivers or those frontline employees that are making those connections with residents, that definitely helps. And I know there's some purpose behind that. You know, there's that service piece, or there's a giving in there, but for a leader to really think about the value that understanding purpose deeply plays into that, what does that look like for them? What kind of role does purpose play in that process?
There's some really fascinating numbers around retention and engagement. Over 60% of the entire workforce is disengaged. Roughly around 65 to 70% of employees are actively looking for other jobs. Isn't that interesting, right? It's how those
That
numbers
yeah,
mirror that 60% disengaged. So, roughly the same amount are actively looking for other opportunities. And so, we have to find better ways today to retain people. A lot of people think, well, if I just give them more bonuses,
yeah,
the average mental high of a bonus is about 6 weeks. So, that's not a good retention tool. Increasing their salary, same thing. Bumping their benefits a little bit, same thing. Giving them a little bit more vacation time, same thing. The effect of that fades very, very quickly. It's like in science class, it's like flash paper. The
yeah,
thing that actually drives people to a long-term commitment with an organization is individual connection of their purpose to the organization's mission and core values. And there's fascinating numbers on it. One study in particular from McKinsey said 87% of employees surveyed that felt that their individual purpose was connected to the mission and values of the organization plan to stay for the long term. The long term. And what's really cool, because a lot of organizations track like employee net promoter score.
mhm,
94%, same study, 94% of employees that felt they had a purpose connection to the mission and vision and values of the organization said they plan to recruit their friends into the organization as well. And what's great about that, if you have A players in your organization, we all know the principle is that A players beget A players. They recruit other A
yeah.
players. And both of those numbers represent saving money and making money just on those 2 points. And that doesn't even include a conversation about what it does to customer experience.
Yeah. No, those numbers are fascinating to me because they're every time in the past when I was working for operators, we would always talk about like what kind of programs are we using? What kind of, and it was always around all of those initiatives you'd kind of mentioned before, like a bonus or those kind of tangible short-term gains. And it never really felt like we were being intentional about Why are they here? How do we connect them to us better? There was fewer operations that I worked in where they tried to do that, but there was still it felt very mechanical. And so
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to make that leap for an operator to make it feel less kind of stuffy and stodgy versus more intentional, more this is our real values. This is
Right.
really truly who we are. And I don't know if you have what kind of insight you can provide for leaders maybe around that.
Yeah, the way that we do it when we get brought into organizations, the way that we do it, we actually use scalable purpose discovery tools and training models to help individual employees and leaders both know the specifics of their purpose. Like our purpose factor assessment, for example, can spit out 625 unique combinations to the end user and break their purpose into four elements: natural advantage, acquired skills, passion, and origin strength, which is the unique combination of what purpose really is. Because again, purpose is the best of what you have to help others, and fulfillment's the result of helping others with the best of
Right.
what you have. And so when a leader knows his or her purpose, and the leader knows the purpose of the individual employee, we can tap into the unique motivational profile, if you will, of the employee and constantly connect it back to the mission. So, in Natural Advantage, for example, one of the archetypes in Natural Advantage is the teacher. So, this is a person that loves to learn and share what they learn. So, if they happen to be in a leadership position, they're going to take a teaching style in their leadership. If you're a leader and you have an employee or a team member that has a teacher archetype in their Natural Advantage, the way you're going to want to lead them is through exploring new ideas, right? Exploring new
Yeah.
ideas and encouraging a environment for them of learning and being able to share what they learn. So that's tremendously valuable when you think about, for example, doing a one-on-one and you know that person has a teacher nature to them. You can motivate them according to that profile, as opposed to saying, "Hi, team member, this is the goal. Did you hit the goal? Why didn't you hit the goal?" That's every one-on-one. That's every if it
Right.
doesn't matter what management model we're looking at, whether it's something from Deloitte or something from other big firms. It's always, what's the goal? Did you hit the goal? Why didn't you hit the goal? Let's set a new goal. If you don't hit the
Yeah.
goal, this is what will happen. Like that model is so old, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. That was one thing that I have heard when trying to be more intentional and be more personalized, I guess, is maybe the way to describe that, is that a lot of leaders start thinking, well, man, this is going to take so much more time because I got to do
Mm,
so much more like back work and understand the
mm,
backstory of these individuals. And well, I'm sure you've come up against that, like,
sure.
resistance.
Oh yeah.
How do you push through and tell the leader, hey, that you're going to get so much more out of it if you do spend that little bit extra doing it this way?
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill to account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, eMenu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. eMenu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
Funny enough, it is important to know the backstory of your team members, because all of us, it's not just your team members, all of us, just as humans, are asking the question, do I matter and does my work matter? And that all drives to another question, which is every day they come into work, they're consciously or subconsciously asking the question, is what I'm doing worth it? Because if they can't answer the question, it is worth it. If they can't do that, then they won't sacrifice. And there's a law as immutable as gravity that success demands sacrifice. So the way that we do that isn't just about knowing their backstory. It's about leveraging tools that actually drive towards that fulfillment. So here's an example. One of the three ways that an individual receives fulfillment into their life is through gratitude. Like when I ask leaders, I've worked with leaders that make millions of dollars. I've worked with leaders that make $50,000. I've worked with a whole spec. I've worked with really stiff professionals in the U.S. military, and that is like the least vulnerable environment I've ever been in, trying to teach something like purpose. I had one
Yeah.
guy, as a funny story. I was teaching at the U.S. Air Force, teaching the leadership responsible for all basic military training. And I was teaching on how vulnerability builds trust. And this captain, colonel, I can't remember his title, literally stands up, like really taught, just stands up, military, just straight up. And he goes, "How do I get my people to be more vulnerable?" And I said, I'm not exactly getting a vulnerability vibe here. I said,
Right. Exactly.
you have to model what you want your team members to mirror. The leader must take off their armor first. Now, I can give a quick tool that a leader can use to leverage fulfillment as a retention tool. And that tool is a specific gratitude tool, because gratitude is actually the top driver of fulfillment. Because if I ask people, what's your most fulfilled day, most fulfilled moment, most of them will point to a time in their career which they were thanked for doing something really, really well according to their skill set. So
Yeah.
I always tell people to thank, acknowledge, support. Thank, acknowledge, support is the model. Thank the team member for the amazing result of whatever the result was. Acknowledge the skill set, the high value skill set they used to produce the result, and then tell them you'll support them in doing more of that in the future. Meaning that last part is about making sure that you stay a mentor and you stay a coach instead of a boss and a commander.
No, that is so true. And you kind of started down this road that I wanted to dive into a little bit, which was taking it down to that community level and needing to create kind of this culture of purpose. Because as the leader, we're not the ones doing the work, right? Our
Right,
job is to
right.
kind of put the pieces in place and make sure that everything is running smoothly. And so, how do we express down to those leaders in the community at the department level or the community leader itself? How do they go about creating a culture of purpose with their staff? So that, because it goes to, again, that better care, higher resident
Yep.
satisfaction. And I think you started down that road a little bit when you were talking about the fulfillment and the process of the thank, acknowledge, support.
The cool thing is that purpose scales through one-on-one relationship. I always tell people, whether your organization is 10 or 100,000 people, lives change in one-on-one relationships. I once had somebody ask me the question, "Hey, tell me the last 10 motivational talks that changed your life." Now, I'm in the motivational space, so that's a little bit of an easier question, but most people actually can't even name one. Then he said, "Now I challenge you to tell me 10 people who have changed your life." He said, "Transformation happens one-to-one. And it's the
Yeah.
one-on-one interaction that we master." One of my personal mentors is John Maxwell, world's top leadership expert.
Yep.
And he says that everything rises and falls on leadership. And what I like to add to that is leadership rises and falls on purpose. Because a leader who knows their individual purpose is a secure, humble leader. A leader that doesn't know his or her purpose tends to be more of an insecure, ego-driven leader
Yeah.
that likes to do it from a command and control position. So the very first step is the leader has to know his or her purpose. And that's easy. I mean, you can find your purpose now with our purpose factor assessment in less than 30 minutes. It's the first in the world scalable purpose discovery tool. So that part's easy. The
Yeah.
next part is helping your team members do the same thing. But a culture of purpose is built on a culture of gratitude that recognizes the best that our people bring every day. Here's how an organization looks when I picture it. I call it the water cycle principle. You're familiar with the water cycle, of course.
Yep.
Clouds, of course, produce rain. Rain falls to the earth, and then the water evaporates back up, and we have more clouds. Organizations really are executives and owners at the top of that cycle. Next down is leaders and middle management. Next down is team members and employees. And coming back up on the cycle is the customer. And the customer feeds value back into the organization. And when you kind of see that picture in your mind, it's important to know that every one of the arrows that connects each component of the organization must be represented by a plus sign, not a negative sign. And what I mean by that is a leader or executives need to give more than they take from leaders. Leaders need to give more than they take from employees, and employees need to give more than they take from customers, and customers will continue to give more value back into the organization. But the early onset death of an organization starts when executive to middle management goes from a positive to a negative. That's when an organization begins to shrink over time. So the way you scale purpose through an organization is by creating a culture of specific gratitude that recognizes people for offering their best.
When you think about that cycle and talking about like the scalability of it, you mentioned earlier, like I think a lot of people think of purpose as like this squishy thing. The system, making it more systematic, is that something that some people gravitate more towards if this is a natural thing to them than if not? Or how does that more innate, like purpose driven versus that command and control need or desire, how does that help or hurt in this process?
Scale, well, when you have leaders that are in a command and control mindset, that's the very first thing that has to be adjusted. And we get command and control people all the way down to the employee frontline level. I have a funny quote. I'm not going to say the person who said this quote, but they said, "Give anyone a walkie-talkie and they'll turn into Saddam Hussein." And what he was saying is, if you give anybody a title or position of authority where ego has gone unaddressed, they will turn into Saddam Hussein. They'll turn into a command and control kind of dictator. And so that's the first stop that we have to address. But here, look at there's two numbers that actually kind of illustrate the gap. About 74 to 75% of leaders in studies admit that purpose is important to decision making and creating a culture. Only about 34 to 35% of those surveyed said they actively use purpose as a decision-making tool. Now, what that illustrates is the gap. It's the desire to do the thing without the knowledge to do the thing. And the reason that is because till now, we've lacked tools to do that, because purpose is kind of, some people kind of describe purpose as why. Some people describe purpose as like definitionally reason for being. We've never viewed purpose as a tool set that we have to offer to our team members and our team members to offer to our customers. And so the way that I look at it, I'm not the woo-woo guru type. I'm the practical purpose discovery guy.
Yeah.
I want to equip somebody to know exactly what they have practically, to identify it specifically so that they can use it every single day in their job. That's how you create fulfillment on demand, by the way. If you know specifically what you have to give, you can consistently give what you have to give. And that's how you create fulfillment on demand. So from a scalability perspective, here's the answer to scalability, like squarely. Change happens one team at a time. So what I tell people, and I've got like a lot of aspiring experts that ask me, how do you create scalable solutions for really large companies? If you can get a roundtable interaction dialed in just right, then you simply have to, from a communications perspective, scale the roundtable digitally or in person across the rest of the organization. Because once again, I heard this said one time, it's not the content that matters. The content's important. It has to be great, but the content creates excuse to create authentic relationship. And it's through authentic relationship that lives change. That's how I look at scalability in an organization.
Yeah, I think without authenticity, everything falls apart because it's just it's just you can't get there. And so we've been talking about like executing all of this. There's got to be some common obstacles that you see when you're working with companies that kind of keep people from discovering their purpose. And how can we help them address this? How can we get them to overcome these obstacles that are in their way?
Yeah, there's a lot of myths. And one of the big ones is that purpose and passion get confused or conflated. They get mixed up. Passion's a lousy decision-making tool. And it's actually, the problem with passion is actually revealed in its definition. Passion in the dictionary, literally Oxford Dictionary says, passion is a barely controllable emotion. And then right there in the definition, we see why it's a lousy decision-making tool, because emotions come and go. They go up and down. And if I look at the top performers, I've been studying top performers for a long time, like a decade. If you look at the top performers in the world, it's not passion or motivation that I would use to describe them. It's actually the word conviction. And I would define conviction as the unreasonable certainty that what I'm doing is right and worth it. Because the top performers in the world look unreasonable to the reasonable and certain to the uncertain. So one of the first obstacles we have to overcome in a purpose discovery process is reframe the conversation off of passion and reframe it onto purpose. Because sometimes even when you've identified your purpose, you're still going to experience tough days. But the cool thing is specific clarity on purpose produces the conviction to overcome the hard days and actually push through them, because mentally you can answer the question, what I'm doing is worth it. And then finally, the other thing that I tell people a big obstacle that people have when they're trying to discover their purpose is they think purpose is role specific or job specific. I've worked with
Yeah.
a few NFL players after they've been cut from the NFL, and their life mentally is just falling apart because their whole life's purpose in their mind was that my purpose is to be an NFL player, and they never thought what would happen on the other side of that.
Right.
And purpose is position agnostic. It's job agnostic. It's the collection of things that you have to give no matter the role that you're in. And so if we can reframe that conversation, allows people to realize that their purpose has applicability when they start out in their career, move up to management, become an executive, become an entrepreneur, go to the NFL, leave the NFL, they can reapply their purpose in new ways and new contexts.
Yeah. No, the NFL example makes so much sense. I mean, because
Yeah.
you were this, and now you are not ever going to be that again. So
Right.
it makes so much sense. As we wrap up here, I do want to kind of shift a little bit and talk a little bit about you mentioned the studies and the information about, like, as you age, how purpose is important. And so,
Right.
what are 2 or 3 things or strategies that we can use in our communities around what you describe in your book, The Purpose Factor, to help our residents maintain their sense of purpose when they're living with us in the communities?
It's super important that no matter the age, somebody needs to know their specific purpose, because creating environments where your customers can live lives of contribution to each other is actually what's going to make the biggest difference. That when they wake up in the morning, there's a reason to get up from bed
Mhm.
to go make a contribution into somebody else's life. Again, when we have a daily, and there's a lot of research on the blue zones, like the places in the world where people live over the age of 100. One of the biggest indicators in those blue zones is a daily sense of purpose consistently across every one of those zones. We have to create an environment where your customers can experience a life of contribution and the gratitude feedback loop that comes from that, because there's 3 ways people receive fulfillment. The first one we already talked about, which is gratitude. The second one is giving. And it's giving where maybe you didn't get gratitude, but you get to watch the benefit. You get to
Yeah.
watch the transformation that you contributed to. And then the final thing too is growth. We need to be growing qualitatively and quantitatively in every area of our life. So when you're thinking about how you manage these communities, you want to create an environment where each one of your customers can experience the opportunity to receive gratitude for their contribution, to receive the opportunity to personally give, even if they don't get gratitude, but they get to watch the transformation. And then they can grow qualitatively and quantitatively. Like if I were to build an organization that was focused on senior living, those would be the 3 pillars that I focus on to ensure that every single one of my customers is getting up with a reason to get up. Because the mental challenge, the reason to get up, that's what actually prevents memory loss and mental decline and cognitive decline.
Yeah. I mean, we could spend probably another hour just talking about that
Oh yeah.
piece for sure. So,
Yeah.
Brian, how can the listeners connect with you, learn more, get a copy of your book? Just kind of give us your details so they can follow along with you.
Of course, you can grab a copy of the book, The Purpose Factor, Extreme Clarity for Why You're Here and What to Do About It. That's over on Amazon. Our assessment is available on purposecompany.com. And then we like to hang out with people over on LinkedIn. We post and I say we, because my wife and I post a lot of content on LinkedIn because we're actually co-founders of our company and our fast growing team. So we post a lot of great purpose centered content with respect to purpose centered content on leadership over on LinkedIn. So join us on LinkedIn too.
Perfect. Well, Brian, I thank you so much for taking the time to visit and really kind of, I guess, scratch the surface on what purpose can do for senior living operators across the country. So I appreciate
Wow.
all your time today, and thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Yeah. Thank you, friend.
So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestle. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.